Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Dreadnought, which is episode 17 of season 2 of Star Trek Voyager. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek as determined by my Patreon user polls. The episode to win my latest Patreon poll is the second season Voyager episode, Dreadnought. So Dreadnought is the episode in which Voyager encounters a Cardassian missile in the Delta Quadrant that B'Elanna had previously reprogrammed for the Maquis to destroy Cardassian targets. However, it had been brought into the Delta Quadrant by the caretaker and had malfunctioned and is targeting a populated planet, and Voyager has to stop it. However, B'Elanna is unable to reprogram the missile, so it brings them into a battle of wits with this intelligent missile until finally B'Elanna is able to break through and destroy the core right before Janeway was about to sacrifice Voyager in order to stop the missile. However, B'Elanna was able to prevail and save this world of innocent people and save the day. So, I gotta admit, this is one of those Voyager episodes or one of those Star Trek episodes that I didn't really care for that much when it first came out, and for the longest time I didn't think much of this. To me, this was like a less than average, below average throwaway episode. However, as it's one of those episodes that as I get older, I appreciate it more. And I've started to appreciate this episode more and more. And I think it's because the older I get, the more I appreciate character stories. I'm all about the good character stories. And as a action suspense episode, this episode is kind of average. It doesn't really offer that much. I mean, it does get exciting towards the end of the episode, particularly when Janeway is almost going to sacrifice Voyager. However, even that aspect is more interesting as a character story aspect, what it says about Janeway's character. But moreover, of course, the big character story in this episode is B'Elanna's character story. And that is something that I've grown to appreciate as time goes by, and especially what they do with B'Elanna in later seasons, i.e. her character assassinations, where she basically becomes Tom's wife and loses all sort of any complex or dynamic character traits which she had in earlier seasons. Of course, those who are familiar with my reviews will know that I don't care much for the Tom B'Elanna pairing, and also that I feel like with most of the characters, pretty much every character in the show who is not the Doctor or 7 of 9, Voyager kind of ruined their characters in later seasons, and they all became flat, uninteresting characters. And I think B'Elanna was definitely amongst them, that she was a way more interesting character in the earlier seasons. And here you can see her strong chemistry between Harry Kim, which is who she should have ended up with, but again, not beating that dead horse. Also, watching this episode does make me appreciate, it's always refreshing, especially after watching later Voyager season 6 and 7 episodes, to come back and watch a season 2 episode. It's so refreshing. I just love the feel of it so much more. And I know not everyone feels that way, and a lot of people say that the Voyager wasn't very good in its first 2 seasons and got better, which is an opinion I really don't understand. But I will admit a lot of it does have to do with maybe nostalgia for me, because I was really into Star Trek and I have fond memories of watching seasons 1 and 2 of Voyager, whereas later seasons I was barely paying attention to it. So maybe that has something to do with it, but I honestly think that the character writing was stronger, and that is, as I said, a very strong trait that I look for in any story is strong character stories, and I think the later seasons severely lacked them, whereas the earlier seasons were much better at doing this, and this is an example of that. However, I will say that I don't like this episode as much as the season 5 episode Warhead, which I bring up because it's a very similar episode. In fact, I already did a review for Warhead, and I think I brought up this episode saying that Warhead was better because Warhead was also involved a storyline about a intelligent missile trying to destroy a planet that Voyager was trying to stop. However, I do think that episode was a lot better and did this premise better. However, they took a different tact with the missile being actually intelligent instead of malfunctioning as this missile was. And we had some great moments with the Doctor playing the version, like Robert Picardo playing the version of the AI and missile. He did an outstanding job with it, and had good character development for Harry Kim in that episode. So I do maintain that it is the better episode of this premise. However, I still do appreciate this episode for what it is, for what it did for B'Elanna's character, and it's just refreshing seeing B'Elanna being actually a good dynamic character and not the cardboard cutout she was in later seasons. So I do appreciate it for that. But the issues I have with this episode, which is probably what hit me when I first saw it, which is why I didn't care much for this episode, because I do have some issues. First of all, the premise of this episode, of this specific episode, is so hard to buy. And I do have to do a lot of suspension of disbelief in order to buy the premise of this episode. And so I kind of have to look past that in order to appreciate the character story of the episode. Because first of all, the first hard thing to get over is the caretaker brought an unintelligent, lifeless missile, or actually it's kind of intelligent. Okay, so an artificial intelligence, no organic life on it, missile into the Delta Quadrant, which is completely not how the caretaker was described. The caretaker was described looking for organic life forms to continue his work. And intelligent organic life forms, and a artificial intelligent missile certainly does not fit that bill. So that's the first thing that's hard to get over, because there's no way in hell the caretaker would bring Dreadnought into the Delta Quadrant. In fact, they kind of glossed over that as a plot convenience thing, because I think they themselves know that actually doesn't make any sense, so they just try to just gloss, oh yeah, it's brought into the Delta Quadrant by a caretaker, whatever. So that's strike number one. Strike number two is how obtuse this missile is being about, oh, I'm still in the Alpha Quadrant, and this is the Maquis target, and every time B'Elanna tries to point out the fact that, hey, you dummy, you're in the Delta Quadrant, it says, oh, this is a deception. Now, I know that the episode itself tries to make up excuses as to why this is that it malfunctioned when the caretaker hit it, and there was a Cardassian. It had to do with the fact that B'Elanna reprogrammed it, and there was an old Cardassian subroutine that was messing with it. Blah 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 blah. But I'm sorry, that doesn't cut it. Like, that is a very flimsy excuse at best. I think it's even generous to call it flimsy. Extremely flimsy excuse that really is really impossible to buy, really. There's no reason why this missile would be being that obtuse, yet it's still completely 100% functional in every other way. It manages to outsmart B'Elanna. It manages to stay on course. It manages to be completely destructive. It manages to be witty and intelligent, yet it doesn't realize that it's not in the fucking Delta Quadrant. I'm sorry, I don't buy that for a second. That's not how malfunctions work. If one aspect, that malfunction is not so specific just to that one plot point that they want, but the rest of the missile works amazingly well. That is bullshit, and I never buy that, and I never will buy that, and that's just impossible to buy, in my opinion. And it's also frustrating throughout the episode just how repeatedly obtuse. Oh, the probability of being in the Delta Quadrant 70,000 light years away from the Alpha Quadrant is negligible. I'm like, no, you're an idiot. Like, you wouldn't say that. So anyway, it's frustrating to me every time it does that. And said, oh, instead you're working with the Federation Cardassian Alliance. I mean, the obtuse level, like, is just off the scale. Off the scale, and so it's so frustrating. So, I know it's malfunctioning, but come on, that's no excuse. But anyway, so yeah, so those things, those flaws are really inherent and really huge. I know some people might try to dismiss the caretaker flaw as just nitpicking, but they're wrong. It's not. It's fundamentally baked into the episode. It's how the missile got there in the first place, and they know it's a bullshit excuse, which is why they gloss over it. So, no, this is fundamental issues with the premise of this episode that's completely not work. So in order to enjoy this episode, I do kind of have to suspend disbelief and gloss over this myself. However, when I do find this is a really strong character story for B'Elanna. So I mentioned this before. What exactly do I mean by that? Well, let me get into more detail. It's a really interesting premise that they set up, that B'Elanna had found this Cardassian missile and reprogrammed it to attack Cardassian targets for the Maquis, and that she spent a really long time reprogramming the missile. But the bigger issue came in the fact she did this behind Chakotay's back. And she mentioned that this is when she first met Chakotay. She didn't know him very well, and that she kind of betrayed him and went behind his back, and that he said that he was really hurt by the fact she did this when she revealed it. So it was something that she extremely regretted doing, but she thought, oh, when it disappeared, she assumed it was destroyed. But now, like, it's still here and it's about to kill millions of billions of people, innocent people, is like her biggest nightmare come to life. And that was a really strong character story for her. And it also speaks volumes to Chakotay that he didn't tell anyone about this. Like, he didn't tell anyone that B'Elanna did this behind her back without orders. That he left that part out, and B'Elanna even brought that up when she was talking to Paris about it. That was the part that Chakotay conveniently left out because he respects her now and doesn't feel the need to, and he knows that she regrets doing this, so he doesn't feel a need to sort of re-blame her or put more ire on her. But she herself knows that she is solely responsible, and that those billions of innocent people die, it will solely be her fault and no one else's. And so, and of course, I'm sure Chakotay and no one else looks at it that way, but she does. And so she puts that pressure on herself. And so she's extremely motivated to prevent this from happening. And this really comes through in the scenes between her and Dreadnought, where she is talking to this computer and trying to outwit it. You can tell how frustrating she gets the more the computer outwits her and tries to defeat her and puts up roadblocks, and that eventually she gets to the point where she is willing to sacrifice her own life, because that's how much. And I think this has more to do with guilt than anything else, that she couldn't live with herself knowing that she allowed billions of people to die solely because of her actions. So it's a battle of wit against her own morality, against her own sense of guilt. And it was a really strong story, and the actress does an amazing job playing it. Mind you, she's actually playing both parts because she voices the computer of Dreadnought, so she's basically talking to herself, and she does such a good job. This is a really great performance. This episode was directed by LeVar Burton. LeVar Burton said that he appreciated this actress so much more after directing her in this episode, and just was amazed at how great of a job she did. And I agree. I think this is nothing to be sold short. And again, this is something you wouldn't get in later seasons with this actress. So this is again unique to what makes me love season 2. I know some people like to shit on season 2 because of freaking Threshold and other crap in it, but to me that's in the minority. Like the majority of season 2 is stuff like this. That even though I don't think this episode is amazing, it's this character piece that you don't get in later seasons. It's funny because I was reading what Roxanna Dawson was saying, that after making this episode, she asked the producers kindly if they have another episode where she's featured prominently, if she could actually work with another human being. Referring to the episode Faces, in which she's had to play off of herself again, so she had to play both characters, and then Prototype, where she had to play off of an artificial intelligence robot, so basically a prop. She had to act with a prop, and then this episode she has to act with just, a computer. And, and so she's like, yeah, would you mind too much actually having me act off of another human being? Which I find humorous that they just keep coming up with these plots for her. But anyway, yeah, and then I also like the Janeway side of the story as well. The way that they bring up the fact, this is brought up in several episodes, that the Kazon have been spinning rumors and lies and sullying their reputation and telling everyone that Voyager, are just, hostile aliens that attack you at every case, which of course is nonsense and every time. And I love how the way Janeway casually addresses this when the guy's like, oh, I heard your reputation, I've heard about you, and she's like, yes, I'm aware that the Kazon are telling people that we're hostile, but that's just because they don't want us making allies. I felt really, that was cool. And then how very quickly he's able to see for himself that he's not obtuse, because that would have frustrated me if he was being obtuse about it. But he's quickly able to see through Voyager's actions that no, she's right, Kazon were lying about her, that they're actually there to help. And it was interesting, the bond that she formed with this guy, and how she was trying so hard to stop this missile from hitting the planet. And likewise, similar to B'Elanna, Janeway was willing to sacrifice her own life. Now I think this is one of the first times, it's not the very first time we've seen this death wish from Janeway that we've seen recurred throughout the series. I think maybe this might be the first time they did it, and they did make this a recurring theme throughout the rest of the series, where she's always willing to sacrifice herself in order to resolve the situation, in order to save lives. And then whenever any of her other senior officers try to talk her down from it, she's like, just dismisses them out of hand. However, in this case, at least she did let Tuvok stay behind, because I think most other cases she would be like, no, it has to just be me and no one else. But here she lets Tuvok stay with her, knowing that will mean his death, because I think they had that connection. I think that was a really nice moment too between Tuvok and Janeway, and Tuvok is like, you're going to need a first officer in case something happens to you. I want to stay behind. And I think she could see that he was also willing to sacrifice his life, and it was like, please don't take this away from me. And that Janeway recognized that, and I was like, okay, you can stay. That was actually a really beautiful moment. And the fact, not only was she willing to sacrifice her own life, but destroy the ship, and thus stranding her entire crew in the Delta Quadrant, making it pretty much 100% certain that they never get home ever again, which has always been her main goal and hope and dreams. But that she was willing to sacrifice that rather than let billions of innocent people die. And she even said that she's like, this is the choice between letting billions of people die and is no choice at all. And it speaks very highly of her character. And as I said, this did make for a really exciting final act, because they did, as absurd the premise of this episode was, they did set up an interesting situation where the missile was outwitting them and beating them in every single term. So it seemed like an unstoppable opponent. And so they would have to go to the extreme length of sacrificing themselves and destroying the ship in order to stop the missile. And it did set the stakes really high, and the tension was extremely high. That Voyager almost got destroyed because of this. So I do think in that way it does make it a unique episode. So my rating for Dreadnought out of 10, I'm going to give this an 8. Extremely good. In the past, I would have given this episode a 4 or 5. But as I said, I've come to appreciate this episode a lot more for the very strong character story, for the very strong acting on Roxanna Dawson's part, and of course the Janeway stuff. It had a nice moments that she was willing to sacrifice her life, and the moment we had between her and Tuvok. Very strong character stories, very strong stuff, and as I said, a really intense suspenseful story at the end that really had you on the edge of your seat. Now, it doesn't get more than an 8, of course, because the premise is nonsense, and you have to look past a lot of you have to yada past a lot of BS, which is why I hadn't appreciated this episode before, because it was hard to get past that premise, which is total nonsense, and the obtuseness of Dreadnought. Oh, I'm not an adult squad, is very frustrating throughout the episode. But I think ultimately, I do think the character stories supersede that and get past part of that, which is why I'm willing to give this as high as an 8. So that is it for my review of Dreadnought. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for all those who support me on Patreon. Very much appreciated. And if you would like to support me on Patreon and get videos like this 2 months in advance, you can click on the link below. As little as $1 a month will gain you access to advanced videos like this. And of course, I would like to thank everyone, even those who don't support me on Patreon, for subscribing, liking, and watching my videos. Also very much appreciated. Anyway, thank you so much. Be sure to check out my channel as I do many more Star Trek reviews, as well as covering other shows like all things Star Trek, Prodigy, Discovery, Picard, and any other new shows that happen to air. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks so much for watching.